Have you ever set a huge, exciting goal for yourself, only to watch it, just completely fizzle out after a week? Yeah, we've all been there. But what if the reason we fail has nothing to do with our motivation and everything to do with our strategy? And what if I told you there's a surprisingly simple solution that works with our brain, not against it? So let's get into it.
So let's start with the big one, the question that drives so many of us crazy. Why do our best laid plans, our New Year's resolutions, all those grand ambitions, why do they almost always fall apart? Are we just not trying hard enough? Are we lazy? Well, the answer is actually much, much simpler, and it has everything to do with how our brains are wired.
And here it is, the single biggest reason we fail. We rely on willpower. We think of it as this endless source of strength we can just tap into whenever we want. But, neuroscience tells us it's much more like a phone battery. And every single day, that battery gets drained.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to go to the root of the problem. Let's take a closer look at why our old approach, just gritting our teeth and trying harder, is pretty much designed to fail from the get-go.
Just think about your average day. Every little decision you make, from what to eat for breakfast to how you handle a tough email at work, it drains a little bit of that mental energy. Now, pile on the pressure from your job, any stress from your relationships, the constant temptation of your phone buzzing, plus any background fear and anxiety, and by the time you get to the evening, that willpower battery's totally on red. It's not a moral failing. It's just human biology.
Right, so if willpower is the problem, what on earth is the solution? This is where it gets really fun, because the answer is completely counterintuitive. It's not about finding more energy, it's about needing way less of it. It's time to start impossibly small.
This right here, this is the core idea that changes everything. What if your goal wasn't to meditate for 30 minutes, but to just sit on the cushion for 1 second? Not to write a novel, but to just write a single sentence. When the first step is that tiny, how could you possibly fail?
And you can see the two paths laid out so clearly here, can't you? On the left, you've got that big bang approach. It feels heroic for a day, right? But it actually puts your brain on high alert, it triggers its threat response. But then on the right, you have the tiny steps method. And this approach is stealthy. It doesn't need a huge burst of motivation, just a little bit of consistency. And that's what allows it to build this quiet, unstoppable momentum over time.
Now, this isn't just some nice sounding idea. It's backed by some absolutely fascinating science. So let's actually pop the hood and look at what's really happening inside your brain when you try to build a new habit.
Okay, so your brain's #1 job, above all else, is to keep you safe. And it does that by keeping things stable and predictable. So when you suddenly announce, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and run 5 miles every day, your brain doesn't see that as a positive change. It sees it as a massive threat to the status quo. It sounds the alarm and hits you with a huge wave of resistance to get you back to your safe, comfortable normal.
And this is the genius of it all. This is the hack. A tiny little habit like doing just one push-up is so insignificant that it doesn't set off the brain's security system. It's like a secret agent sneaking past the guards. It just flies right under the radar. There's no fear, no fight, because the action feels completely non-threatening.
And look at how this progresses. Every single time you repeat that tiny action, you are physically carving a new little path in your brain. And with enough repetition, that path gets deeper and wider, easier to travel. What once took a little bit of effort becomes automatic. That's a habit. And then eventually, that habit just becomes part of who you are. You're no longer someone who's trying to floss, you're just someone who flosses. It's your new identity.
And here's the really cool part. Your brain doesn't actually wait for you to cross some giant finish line to give you a pat on the back. It releases a little hit of dopamine, that feel-good chemical, simply because you made progress. It rewards the action itself. This makes the whole process feel good, which of course makes you want to do it again tomorrow.
So you see, this is way more than just a productivity tip. When you really start to embrace this idea of taking one small step at a time, it goes from being a technique to a really profound philosophy for how you approach your entire life.
And this idea isn't new at all. It turns out, for centuries, ancient wisdom has been pointing to this deep truth that science is only now confirming, that real, lasting change comes from consistency, not from intensity. A small, steady flame is so much more powerful than a brief, wild explosion.
So this whole way of living is built on a few really simple but powerful principles. It's all about choosing action over perfection, doing something imperfectly instead of waiting for the perfect moment that never shows up. It's about focusing on the now, just the single step right in front of you. And it's about remembering that life isn't a race against anyone else. Your journey is your own.
And what happens when you stumble, which you will? In the old all-or-nothing model, one failure means the whole thing is over. But in this philosophy, a small misstep is just data. It's an opportunity for your brain to go, okay, that didn't work, and then to learn, adapt, and build that mental muscle we call resilience.
And the reason this is even possible is because of this incredible thing called neuroplasticity. Your brain isn't this fixed, static thing. It's constantly changing and rewiring itself based on your actions. So every single time you try, even if you don't succeed perfectly, you are literally strengthening your brain's capacity for change. You are becoming more adaptable.
Ultimately, this whole journey isn't really about impressing other people or hitting some external metric. The most important changes, and definitely the toughest battles, they all happen on the inside.
And that forces us to ask a really, really tough question. In this age of social media, where everything feels like a performance, are we actually focused on being a certain way or just on being seen a certain way? You know, psychologists actually have a name for this very modern struggle. They call it the displayed identity crisis. And it's that painful, nagging disconnect we feel when our public image, the one that's so successful and happy and put together, doesn't really match how we feel on the inside. We end up becoming strangers to ourselves.
So the real takeaway here is that you're not at war with the world or with your circumstances. The real fight is internal. It's against your own fear of not being good enough. And it's against that paralyzing illusion that you have to be perfect before you're even allowed to start.
And this completely redefines what success even means. It's not some finish line you cross. In a world that's screaming for bigger, faster results, maybe the most revolutionary achievement of all is simply to keep going. To just keep taking that next small step, especially on the days when no one is watching.
Because with every tiny action you take, every time you choose to show up for yourself in some small, almost invisible way, you're doing so much more than building a habit. You are casting a vote for the person you want to become. You're slowly closing that painful gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. A more authentic, a more resilient, and a truer version of you is being born. And it all starts with a single tiny step.